welcome to Screenshots. What do you have for our viewers today, Juan?
We're going to talk about the Boston Open that we had this past weekend.
That was a great tournament, some great battle.
Tournament. One thing I want to add to saying that it was a great tournament is the organization was amazing. Johan did a great job. The favors were great. The lunch was great. Everything. And despite the conditions, I think it was a phenomenal event.
Yeah, the conditions certainly weren't great.
Oh my God, it was terrible. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how the rankings are shaping up for nationals and the 3 upcoming events and who's playing what and what the potential seedings for the nationals are going to be. And at the end, we're going to discuss a little bit about how to play in the rain. We already had this season 3 tournaments that were playing in the rain, and we're going to give some tips to some players out there that might be helpful for them.
Okay, fantastic. We'll be right back. So last weekend, Juan, was the 2015 Boston Open, won by Parsons Durant yet again.
Shocking.
Why don't we go through the round of 16, because I don't think there's anything before that. Or do you want to talk about the round of 32 match between Max Lepavere, Corey Parr, Alex Hume, Tommy Croker?
Well, all I can say about the match, because we didn't watch it, I mean...
I got an extensive report from both Corey and the French sensation.
Yeah, well, all I can say is that match I knew was going to be close. And it ended being very close. As I'm almost never wrong.
I think 7-5 in the third set tiebreaker.
7-5 in the third set tiebreaker, so it was very close. I thought either team could have won that match. It didn't go in for Corey and Max, but other than that, we can't say much about it because we didn't watch it.
So that match was played on a pretty good court. According to Corey, they then drove over to the country club and played Marco and George on an absolutely brutal court. And for whatever reasons ended up getting killed. So let's start going through our 16s, since we already mentioned that 16. So the first 16 I saw was the Parsons Durant Vanchilla Uline match.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of that too.
You got to wonder who Alex and Brian have pissed off, because they can't seem to buy a draw right now. 2 tournaments, twice getting Parsons Durant in the 16.
I mean, I think that if they were anywhere else on the draw, they could have gotten at least to the semifinals. That team of Alex and Brian are a great team, but they've been very unlucky with the draws. So that's unfortunate for those 2 guys, because I think they're terrific players. But, the luck is not on their side.
No, it was interesting seeing them on the court. I don't know that there's a lot of belief that they can beat Parsons Durant right now. But to be honest, I only see 3 or 4 people in the country that believe they can beat Parsons Durant right now, and you're one of them. But we'll get to that later. So then let's talk about, you had a real tough round of 16. Some people even picked you to lose, which is just stunning to me.
Yes.
You and Leonard played against Anton Mavrin and Patricio Mistrano.
Yeah.
So tell me how that match went.
It was a good match, a well-played match. Again, it was raining. The conditions were brutal. All Friday was pretty bad.
Now, you played on that first court where they played the finals, where the steam was just brutal.
Yeah, you could hardly see the ball coming. But I think actually Anton and Patricio played pretty well. Anton was returning the serve off the deck like I see very few people doing, and the ball was skidding. It wasn't that easy to do, and they were playing well. It's just that Leonard, I think, played a great tournament overall. I mean, we can go over every single round. Leonard played amazing. I just did what I had to do. I mean, I didn't make many mistakes.
Nice to have the old Leonard back.
It was great to have him back. I mean, it was phenomenal. But in that match, I don't think, even though they played well, we never felt threatened. It was actually, I went into that match thinking it was going to be a lot harder than what it ended being. We won 6-3, 6-3.
Well, the Leonard who played the first 3 tournaments of the year, you wouldn't have won that match 6-3, 6-3.
No, I know. That was great. It was great to have him back.
I don't ever remember being on a court where the steam was so bad that you couldn't see the ball.
It was very hard.
We played our first match on that court, and Aman Singh just whined endlessly about it. I said, come on, it's the same for everybody.
Without the steam.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Okay, so the next round of 16 was John Lubau and Steve DeRose versus Guga Gonçalves and Graham McInerney. Yeah. Graham is playing better and better these days.
Yeah, really well. They played on a pretty good court, on one of the back courts on the Western Golf Club. They had a 3-setter, good match. They played really good points. I think that there were some mistakes here and there. I mean, at this level, this shows you that just a few points make a big difference. And sometimes those errors are not big errors, they're just tiny errors, but those little things make a really big difference. So just Blue and the Rose have more experience and more confidence in their game, and they ended winning in this third set. I think it was 6-2 or 6-3.
Yeah, Graham's playing better and better, and it's fun to see him develop.
Yeah.
Okay, so next round of 16 was Scott Falatek and Vlatko Nicek versus Mick Ordoya and Mark Innes.
Another three-setter, wasn't it?
6-4 in the third. Falatek and Nicek pulled it out. A little more experience. Having watched Mark and Mick play enough this year, to me, one of the things they're struggling with is Mark just doesn't have a lot of confidence on that forehand off the deck. And more teams are just feeding the ball to him. Mark and Mick switched a little bit in the backcourt to get Mick's forehand on the ad side. Haven't quite gotten over the hump of that issue yet.
I agree with that, and I would have to add another thing. I think sometimes Mick goes for a little too much.
Well, if you don't see the ball for 7, 8, 9, 10 shots, and then the ball comes to you, there's obviously that impulse to take a swing at it.
But that's what you have to do as a paddle player. I mean, it's very easy in this sport to isolate a player, and if you are not seeing many balls and then all of a sudden you get to see a ball because you're out of rhythm and you went missing, then you're not doing your job. You gotta be ready. I think that it's tough. It's tough because they can isolate your partner, and then all of a sudden you see a ball and you want to do too much, and that's what I think Mick has to adjust. He has to be a little more patient. He has all the shots, but sometimes he tries to do too much with them.
Well, it's a matter of experience. This is Mick's first year playing the tournaments at a high level.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying this in order to help him. And I've been talking to him a few times, and I told him in his face, maybe this way, when everybody gets to see that I'm actually...
You hear that, Mick?
with him,
Be more patient, Mick.
maybe this way he'll understand.
Okay. Next round of 16 was Sebastian Bredberg and Martin Bostrom versus Jeff Morneau and Todd Hiscox making his return to the tour.
Yeah.
I know a little bit of match having spoken to Sebi. Tough match, 6-4. Point here, point there. Not much to decide.
Few points make the difference.
Yeah. Drew Broderick and Jared Palmer versus Bukowski and Kosiecki.
Was it 1-1?
1-1.
I didn't watch a match.
Yeah, and then the final match, which was a real good match, I didn't get to see any of it, I don't know if you did, was Baxter and Heath versus Rob Bacher and Scott Kaler. Three-setter.
Three-setter. We said that actually we picked Bacher and Kaler to win that match.
Yes, we did.
Baxter and Heath proved again that they're playing great, that they're having great results, and they're getting better and better.
Well, that win jumped them into the top 10 with a legitimate chance to move up more. And we're going to do a brief segment later in the show about national seedings and how that all pans out. So that takes us to the quarters. First quarter was Parsons Durant. Well, not first quarter, but the top of the draw was Parsons Durant versus Falatek Nicek. Rematch from last year. Match was very similar. I don't know if you saw any of it.
I watched online a little bit.
Did you like the commentating?
It was great.
So I don't know that any of the four players had any doubt about who was going to win the match. Scott and Vladdy were in it, but it was never really. I'm sure Mark and Johan never felt threatened.
They had chances. They did have chances.
Johan must have been threatened by Mark, because that was about as bad as I've ever seen Mark play.
Yeah, Mark made. I saw one game that Mark made
like 10 errors.
10 errors, and they still won the game.
And then Johan gave him a big hug at the end of the game.
That was pretty good. Well, that shows that even playing that badly, they still win. That's pretty good.
One of the issues for
Falatek
Nicek, and we talked about it on the stream, was Scott's serve.
Well, that has always been the issue.
But it seems to be getting worse, not better to me.
Well, but the thing is, the guy can still come in and make the volleys.
The guy's unbelievable. The rest of his game is rock solid.
Unreal hands. So if he makes the first volley, and this goes for all the players out there, the serve is as good as your first volley. It doesn't matter how much spin or pace you put on the serve. If you don't make the first volley, you don't have a good serve, unless you decide to stay back.
Yeah, the other problem being if you put in that soft serve, your partner can get killed.
Well, but if your partner is ready, and it's part of the game. I think the number one priority is still get the serve in. I mean, imagine or remember what happened to Leonard and I in Long Island. We couldn't get
the serve in. Yeah.
Had we maybe dink the serve in and start playing the point, we would have had a better chance.
You certainly have a better chance to win the point if the serve's in the box.
There you go.
Okay, so next semi was you guys versus Lubao DeRose, you and Leonard, and this is your, what, 27th consecutive win over those guys?
I don't know. I mean, for some reason, I match up well against those guys. They're a great team. I mean, they have all the shots.
They're not so great when you're on the other side of the net, apparently.
No, they're good, but we just happen to play well against them.
What was the score of the match?
3-3. We play well. We play well. They made some mistakes at important points. They were up 2-love in the second set, and I think they were up 2-love 40-15, and we came back, won that game, and that kind of all of a sudden we won 5 games in a row, or 5-2. They break 5-3, and then we ended winning 6-3.
Okay, so that's the top of the draw. Bottom of the draw, you have Sebastian and Martin with a rematch against Marco and George. I don't know if you got to see any of that match.
They were playing at the same time that I was
Yeah,
playing.
I called that match. Marco and George are struggling right now. They did not play well at Midwesterns, and they played even more poorly here. I think that some of Marco's serve issues have kind of gotten in his head and affecting the rest of his game. George is playing a little bit too fast. That match was, I guess, 4-3, and it really wasn't that close. They really are not playing well, but they've got another 6 weeks to figure it out for nationals. That win boosts Sebi and Martin up to, I guess, number 7 in the country, and they've got a shot at a top 6 seed for nationals. So last quarterfinal is Drew and Jared versus Baxter Heath. 1-4. Did you get to see any of it?
No, I was.
I talked to Jared a little bit afterwards. Jared said that they gave him some problems, that they generated a lot of offense, and it was an uncomfortable match. Those were, I guess Drew and Jared lost 10 games getting to the finals, and that match was half of them. So
That shows again that those guys are playing great.
those guys are now also top 10 in the country. I think they're 8 or 9, I guess 8 right now, and we're going to talk about them later as well. So semifinals, so Saturday's played under just brutal conditions.
Really bad.
Semis were scheduled for Saturday night. Johan makes a really wise decision to push the semis off to Sunday morning. And of course, we all had to get up a little earlier because Leonard had a flight.
And that was pretty bad for you because you never get up before 10.
Very bad for me. So 8:30 Sunday morning,
And sorry, the surprising part is that I get there to my match at 8:30 and you were already there.
beat you there,
So
huh?
you did wake up earlier. That's funny.
Well, the makeup took a while.
Good.
So 8:30 Sunday morning, it's a perfect paddle morning. A little bit of sun, not much wind, the weather's great. So you guys play Parsons Durant in what I thought was the best match of this season.
It was a good match.
First set, you guys serve for the set at 5-4. Leonard serves a very poor game. At 5-all, you guys have 15-40 on Mark's serve. You missed consecutive return of serves. I think you had another break point later in the game. That's where you missed that little inside-out forehand.
Smart shot.
Smart shot. And then you end up losing the first set in a breaker.
Yes.
And a lot of other teams might have gone away at that point, but not you guys. You played a terrific second set, ended up winning the second set 6-4.
Yes.
Third set starts off, and you can almost feel Mark and Johan shifted into another gear.
Yeah, I mean, not so much. I think that we actually shifted to another gear.
You went down?
We went down, yeah. We got loose after winning the second set.
You guys think you were a little satisfied with winning the second set?
Never satisfied. Never satisfied for winning one set. We get satisfied when we win 2 sets. And I think even though they did play probably a little better, they made less mistakes. We didn't play as well. We made silly mistakes. We started rushing. We thought we could win that match. Like you said, I mean, I think we should have won the first set, to be honest. We had chances. And the key was, once again, and I said it to you off camera, the key was the return of serve.
Return to serve.
We missed too many returns of serves at 15-40 games with Mark serving. And that just can't happen against those guys. I mean, those guys are too good, too solid. You cannot give 3 points away. You cannot.
So little separates winning and losing at that level.
Oh, but against those guys, that whenever they give you that little window, you have to take it. You just cannot do what we did because we ended up paying the price. We had a match that we could have won, and we felt great. We were playing great. Leonard played amazing. We ended up giving it away.
Yeah, Leonard hit a number of great backhands. They went into
Amazing.
the permanent I formation, and Leonard hurt them a lot with his backhand down the line. Just
Amazing.
played great.
Amazing.
The only thing Leonard didn't do great was serve.
That could be, and I think that that's probably because he hasn't been playing much and he's serving too much of a tennis serve. He's having a harder time. I think that he's having a really hard time going to serving to the do side, to the side wire. Like he used to have that serve that nobody could return. I haven't seen his technique because when he serves, I'm at the net, and I'm not supposed to be watching him.
What about the eyes in the back of your head? You don't use those?
I keep him closed because I'm just praying so he can get the serving. I'm going like this. Please get it in. So no, actually, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it is.
How did he serve earlier in the day?
He served well. I mean, he didn't fault much. He didn't fault. I feel
Well,
like he served still great.
There's no question that Parsons Durant put an enormous. Nobody returned serve like Parsons Durant.
No doubt, no doubt. And like I said, that's the difference. The return of serve was the difference in the match. Not just because the ones that we missed, also they make so many good returns that put a lot of pressure on you, and now you have to really, change the strategy. And Leonard never serves and stays back, and against Johan he was serving and staying back because when he was trying to go for a big serve, he was missing it. So he decided to stay back, and we talked about it during the match, and we just wanted to give ourselves a better chance to winning points. And
Well, I loved Leonard's big celebration after he held serve because nobody breaks Leonard Jonassen 5 times in a row.
well, he got that was not good. And actually it was funny because when he held, I went to him and said, Leonard, you held, and we hugged each other. And I think that was when he realized that he actually got broken all the other time. It was funny. And then he held another game
Yep.
after that. So
And that was it.
yeah.
Well, it was a great match. It was a fun match. I loved the whole demeanor of the 4 guys in the court. Obviously, you guys are friends, and there was some just great verbal interchanges.
I like everything, except
Except-
that Johan tried to hit me a few times. I had to do a sign to him. But
I saw something behind the paddle. I couldn't quite make out what that was, but I saw there was a finger involved.
I reproduce that in camera.
Okay, so the other semi it was interesting because your semi went on a few minutes before the Bostrom Broderick Palmer semi. Started maybe 5 or 10 minutes earlier. Matches ended exactly the same time, literally separated by maybe a minute, and Bostrom Bredberg lost 1-1. So I think they really had any problems generating offense at the net. Drew and Jared just kind of stayed back there and lobbed, and it's almost like Drew's patient style puts pressure on teams to do something. I saw Georgia Marco struggle this way at Long Island, where they kind of feel like they have to do something, and that's interesting because it's a complete transition from where it used to be, where the net was a patient place, and now the teams are getting impatient at the net against Drew and Jared, which of course feeds into Drew and Jared's strategy perfectly.
Yes, and I didn't watch the match because I was playing at the same time, but that's exactly how I would describe it. They like playing slow, and Jared is very smart. I mean, the only thing that I would like Jared to see getting rid of is his off-base drive.
His 3-quarter drive. It's not working against the good teams.
He's not working against the
So let's take that into the finals. So they go into the final against Mark and Johan.
which I did watch while I was driving from Boston to Connecticut. I watched the entire match on my phone while driving on 91. I don't know if that's a good thing.
That's definitely not a good
I
thing.
put the sound on Bluetooth and I could hear it on my car. So instead of listening to music, I was listening to your lovely voice.
Well, that was a smart move. I like that. So what were your impressions of the final?
I mean, it was very similar. I mean, to be honest, I was surprised because I thought the dynamics when those 2 guys played against Drew and Gamino were one thing, and that was gonna change playing Jared and Drew. And I think it was just exactly the same.
I agree completely.
Exactly the same. I mean, nothing changed.
Drew volleys better than Jared. I'm sorry, Jared volleys better than Chris. He moves better than Chris. He doesn't have quite the offense Chris has got in the backcourt, and his serve is not as good. But ultimately, the result was almost identical.
Yeah, I mean, it was just there was nothing that those guys could do to hurt them. I mean, at one point they won 3 games in a row in the
Well, it's 6-love, 2-love. It's 6-2, 2-love, 540.
540.
And Jared has a great hold. Mark played a couple of loose points.
Yes.
And it went from an exhibition to a match. They won 3 games in a row. And then to me, the key point of the match.
To go for 2.
So they have 2 break points with Johan serving 2-3. On one of the break points, Johan hits an overhead off the side wire, and Drew has his signature shot from the backcourt, that 1-wire overhead,
Yes.
and he doesn't pull the trigger on it. He hits it, but he kind of guides it. And to me, that's where Drew's got to change his game. And what I was about to get to was, if it's the same thing with Jared and Chris on the court against Mark and Johan, maybe the issue isn't Jared or Chris, maybe the issue is Drew. So Drew has been beating everybody playing this ultra-patient style, being very disciplined. But to me, to beat Parsons Durant, you can't play that way. You can't give them multiple opportunities net because they're going to hurt you. And Drew seems to be unwilling. I know he's not unable because he's got all the talent in the world and all the shots, but he seems unwilling to kind of pull the trigger.
But I also think that Johan and Mark, when they play Drew, to support your way of thinking, what I think is that they know that Drew and Jared are not going to hurt them. It's not going to hurt Mark and Johan. So they actually play a little more patient too. I mean, even though they're still creating a lot of offense and attacking the overheads and all that, they still don't try those crazy shots that they try, for example, when they play me, because they know I'm a mental midget and I will probably try to hit one of those crazy shots, and sometimes I will probably make them. So they do play faster when they play against me. Against those guys, even though they still play fast and they play at their pace, they don't take as much risk because they know that they will have a chance that they will be able to end the point with a nick or with something. Well, that said, in this final, I do think that Drew and Jared control the tempo. However, that shows that Mark and Johan were comfortable playing at that tempo. That proves my point, that they can play at a slower pace because they know they will have a chance. They're not being threatened.
Well, if you give Mark enough overheads, he's going to catch a nick. I mean, maybe three. I mean, I've taught with Mark, and Mark struggles when he teaches not to hit the nick. He just hits the frickin' nick.
Look, against Leonard and I in the semifinals, in the first set, we're up 5-4, and Leonard serving 30-15. We give up the net, and Mark hits like 10 overs in a row. Eventually, he catches the nick and goes sideways. And I think that point turned our set around, and then they ended winning the first set. But going back to the final, you're right. I mean, Mark will eventually catch Nick, and that's why, they can be patient because they will still hit in the overhead, and whenever they hit those 3/4 drives, Johan will volley.
Why doesn't anybody else hit the overhead that Mark hits?
Maybe because Mark is the only one that can hit it.
Well, that's a perceptive analysis.
There you go. I mean, I try it. I just don't have that shot. Like everybody has different shots. Johan has that great cut to the deuce player that puts that player totally out of position. I like hitting the drop shot. Mark is great at that roller. Everybody has different shots, and Drew has that spike of the side wire.
One of the things to me that makes Parsons Durant so effective is the disparity between their overheads.
Yeah, I mean, they have that at so much variety. They never hit two overheads the same way.
And Mark and Johan's overhead is so completely different.
I mean, I personally, besides that roller, it's not an overhead. I mean, it's
not an overhead.
Swinging volley. He's great at it. I mean, his footwork is phenomenal because he has to really go back, let it drop, and roll it. I mean, that requires a lot. Although he plays really off the net because Johan is on top of the net and he can go with one reach. He can cover the entire net
on both sides. It's the backhand roller.
So the truth is, besides that shot, I think that Mark overheads, the real overhead, is not that great.
No, he doesn't have any side spin. Right, he doesn't hit it.
He doesn't have to hit it. So I think that that shot is unique, and it's amazing that he aims for the nick and hits it 9.5 times out of 10.
It's amazing.
He's great. Great.
Okay, so that finishes our wrap up of the Boston Open. So Juan, we're in the home stretch of the season. We have three major tournaments left prior to Nationals. So we have this week off, and then we have Short Hills, Philly, and Indy 3 consecutive weeks. And at this point of the season, one of the hot topics amongst all the guys is seedings for Nationals. So let's talk a little bit about how that's starting to unfold as we're coming down the home stretch.
Well, the number one seed is going to be Johan and Mark, even though they're only playing Philly.
Yeah, I think the first 4 seeds are probably pretty much set at this point, barring something extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, I know. Well, number 2, Drew and Jared, definitely. Then 3, Bakker and Goodspeed. Depends on how they do at Indy.
Yeah, they have some points to depend, but they also have the semi at Cincy, which I think would keep them in the 3rd position.
Could be. Yeah, and then 4, it all depends on what happens this weekend at next weekend at Short Hills. Because if Lou Alrose defend the title, I think they will still ahead of George and Marco.
But isn't it going to be, at this point, it's either a 3.25 or a 3.375, down from a 3.75 last year?
the difference. It's not going to be a lot to make them move below Georgia Marco.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think they're only about 4 points. Are they down to 206 and Georgia Marco are 202, I think?
I think they have more than that, but that's something we can check later. But
Okay.
I think that it all depends. I think Georgia Marco would end up being number 4 going to nationals. Then, the 5, 6, 7, 8, those are 4 spots that really make a big difference, because it's not the same of being 7 than being 6.
We'll talk a little bit about that.
Well, as you know, in the nationals, the draw is made in pairs all the way.
Well, it's fours until the quarters.
Force into the. No, what do you mean force into the?
So the teams are grouped in groups of fours until the quarters. So the round of 16, for instance, would be 5 through 8, 9 through 12,
Yes.
1 through
yes.
4, 13 through
Yeah,
16.
but the top 8 get.
In the quarters,
pairs.
it's done in twos.
Yes. So number 7 and number 8 will play
1 and 2.
1 and 2. 6 will play 3 and 4. And so that means that being number 7, you can play against Jared and Drew or Johan and Mark. Where if you're number 6, you could be playing Bakker and Goodspeed or Georgia Marco. Which, don't get me wrong, they're all great teams, but it's a big difference.
Well, clearly the top 2 teams have separated themselves from everybody else
Totally.
by the points and otherwise. But let me also say this. Do you want to play Mark and Johan on Saturday night or Sunday morning? Because you said something to me last weekend about Johan's breakfast on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, I just don't know when I want to play them. I just want to beat them once in my life. Hopefully, one day it will happen. I don't know. I mean, you just gotta play them whenever you have to play them. You gotta be ready.
So let's come back. So assuming Georgia and Marco get the 4th seeds, how do 5 through 8 look at this
Okay,
point?
so 5, as of now, well, it all depends how
Lubao
the
DeRose
girls
do.
in the short hills. But let's say
Because
if
they could
don't
be anywhere
defend-
from 4 to 10.
Yes. So if they don't defend, they're gonna lose a lot of points because they got like 93 points in at Short Hills last year. It was rated 375. It was really highly rated. This year it's gonna be rated lower. So even if they do defend, they're gonna lose some points. So that might put them at number 5. If they don't defend, they might drop below
Significantly.
8. Yeah. So then that would push Leonard and I to number 5 as of today. However, Leonard and I are not playing Short Hills, are not playing Philly.
So you guys are done.
And we're not playing Indy. So the points that we have today are the points that we're going to end up with.
And at this point, you're maybe less than a full point ahead of Bostrom Redberg.
We're 0.0625 ahead of Bostrom Bredberg. But Bostrom and Bredberg are playing Short Hills and are playing Philly. So
Right.
they could get a lot of points. And I think that they will pass us. So they
So-
will be probably the 5th seed nationals unless Lubao and the Rose defend Short Hills.
And who else is back there that could potentially jump into the mix?
Baxter and Heath, that they've been playing great.
They're currently 8th?
They're currently 8th.
And they're probably playing Indy. I don't know that they're in the draw for either Philly or Short
I
Hills.
haven't seen their names down for that, but if they play Indy, and if they get to a final, I think they will jump ahead of us. So that will put them into 6th position. So it all depends how those teams do in the next few weeks.
And then Casamano Lefevre are also a team that could potentially jump up, although they have major points to defend at Short Hills as well.
Yes, and they are playing Short Hills and they are playing Philly. So they have to.
They'd have to go semi in order to jump into the top.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Which is totally doable for those guys. They're great players.
Well, they've not had a good year.
They have not had a good year this year, but you never know. I mean, things.
Well, you want to be peaking in March. You don't want to be peaking in January.
Totally.
Okay, well, we'll keep you updated on that as the next few tournaments get played.
Yep.
So, one of the themes of this season, at least on the men's side of the game, has been really bad conditions. We've now had 3 tournaments in brutal conditions. Why don't you talk to our viewers a little bit about how you adjust your game based on the conditions?
Well, conditions meaning plenty of
Rain and snow.
and snow. Well, it's totally a different game. I mean, it's not played the same way. It's on wet conditions. There are a lot of factors that really come into play, like how the ball plays, how in what shape your paddle is, and then the courts as well. So,
And the courts is multifaceted. It has to do with the shape of the boards, how
Yes.
well the heaters are working,
yes,
number of
a
factors.
lot of things.
Okay, so let's take it step by step. Let's talk about the ball first, since that's obviously a critical element of the game.
Well, the ball, when it becomes wet, becomes much heavier. So the ball doesn't bounce as high. The ball stays much lower and closer to the ground, so it's harder to hit. And then also, after a few games, it just loses its flocking. So then it's much harder to spin the ball. It just becomes like a little rubber thing that just is very hard. And sometimes you get to see the ball moving in the air.
And you say it's hard to spin the ball. Why is it hard to spin the ball?
Well, because when the ball loses its flocking, then it just doesn't break as much, and then also the surface makes the ball skid, so it doesn't break as much when you try to spin the ball. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the paddle. What type of paddle should you be using optimally in bad weather conditions?
Well, a paddle that doesn't have any grit is pretty much death on these conditions. Many members at different clubs like to play with the same paddle for many years, and the truth is you have to. I'd say that every 2 seasons at the most you should be switching paddles, because once the paddle loses its grit, then the ball doesn't grab on the paddle, and just the same effect that it has on the court when it slides, it just also slides on your paddle as well. So then it's very, very hard to control it. Another thing that and this might sound silly, but another thing that and we've seen it happen, and it was on live streaming too. Changing the overgrips on your paddles is very important. I mean, even during the matches when it's raining, we saw Max Lepivert lose his paddle at a match in Long Island. He almost killed.
That's alleged. Some people say that Corey offended Max, and Max was upset, and it wasn't the overgrip.
But it's very hard. I mean,
So switching your overgrip.
switching your overgrip would be important.
Okay, so then let's talk about the third MO of the equipment, the courts.
The courts. The court play a major part of this in this game when it's wet. The courts that are not maintained and they don't have grit, there you can see water standing on the courts, and then the ball just slides. It's very hard to play. It's just you cannot hit a ball. Many times in the tournaments, players serve and you get hit. You just cannot get out of the way.
Yeah, the other thing that happens too sometimes when the ball's sliding is the wet ball, when it hits that back wire, instead of coming up, I guess because of the heaviness of the ball,
It just goes down.
it goes straight down.
Straight down. Straight down.
My serve was awesome on Saturday. You should have seen me serving.
Believe me, I wouldn't pay to see you serving.
The other element of the courts, which was interesting on Saturday, which I hadn't experienced too many times, was the sheer amount of steam.
Yes.
And those heaters work really well.
Very well.
I think for the most part, platform heaters don't work well.
No, well, it's very hard to figure that out, where to position them and where to position the fans and how much space you have underneath.
Well, I'm told that the more space you have underneath, the better off you
Yes,
are.
yes.
The higher the court is,
Yes.
because there's more room for the hot air to
Exactly,
disperse.
Exactly. But, all the courts are different. So in this tournament, the heaters were great, although, like you said, there was so much steam at some point.
Well, they were great at Weston.
Yes.
They weren't so great at other places.
Yeah.
Brayburn struggled. The Country Club was real bad.
Yeah.
It really was a crapshoot in terms of where you played. Had a dramatic impact on what type of match you played.
We played our first round at Brayburn, and we had to switch courts because the first court was water standing on the courts. So we moved to another court that was in better shape. So even within the same club, you have courts that play different. So that's an important element.
So talk a little bit more about when to drive the ball off the deck, how you adjust your game, and what our league players can learn from you when they get stuck out playing in the rain. Because nobody likes playing in the rain. Well,
No.
maybe George Wilkinson, but nobody other than George Wilkinson likes playing in the rain.
Brian O'Connor?
Brian O'Connor is a brilliant rain player.
Yeah. I think that you don't get to drive the ball as much as you do when you play without the rain on dry conditions. It's much harder to time the ball. I think that you should wait for a better opportunity to drive balls off the wires. You get to see a lot more driving from the wires than from the ground, just because it's harder to time the ball. And just a few players can still do it, but you can count them with your hands.
And how about serving?
Well, serving, I think that a lot of players, especially club players, think that when serving in the rain, the serving team has a huge advantage. But let's not forget that you first have to get the serve in.
Yeah, at Long Island, I played against the legendary Ray Croston in the back draw, and Ray's got a lot of spin in his serve, and you could almost see the ball sliding down his paddle as he made contact with it.
It's very hard. If you try to spin the ball in the rain, you'll most likely miss that serve. The flatter serves, that's why your serve was so good, because your serve doesn't have any spin whatsoever. It actually sounds like that when you hit it. It's the servers that hit a flatter serve have a much better advantage than this, and
What about volleying? Any impact on the volleys?
I think that the volleys don't change as much. It's just that the ball is heavier.
So you have to hit the ball dead center.
So you have to hit it dead center too, but also you have to squeeze the paddle a little tighter when you're about to contact the ball. At contact, your grip has to be a little tighter, and angle the face of the paddle a little bit so you can get more depth on the ball. Because like I told you, the ball is much heavier, doesn't bounce as high, but doesn't bounce as high when it hits the ground and when it hits your paddle too. It's like playing with a pretty much summer ball.
And what about lobbing?
Well, you gotta focus on the height on the lob. That's always the case, even on dry conditions. But in the rain, it's
More so than ever.
More important because a low lob is pretty much death. I mean, the overheads are gonna get hit so hard, and the ball is gonna skid so much that it's gonna be very hard to get the ball off the screen.
So just to summarize for our league players, it's kind of interesting that all the elements you're talking about are the same in normal paddle, just more so. So you just have to be very judicious with your decision making.
Yeah, and the overheads too. I mean, the overheads, you want to let the ball drop a little lower than usual, because if you hit down on the overhead, the ball will come up off the screen higher, and that's the only chance that the backcourt team will have to probably drive the ball. So by letting the ball drop lower, you're taking away all kind of chances from the backcourt to drive the ball. That's important. I think that sometimes teams tend to overplay in the rain the overheads because they see the opportunity of putting the ball away, and they hit the ball a little too hard, and now the ball comes off the wire high. The backcourt team drives the ball, and then you end missing a volley because it is harder to volley in the rain than on regular dry conditions.
Yeah, the rain is interesting. In some sense, it's the essence of paddle because you can whine about the conditions, or you can just embrace them and figure it out. And the more you embrace them, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, I just like to add another thing to all this. That is, I've been running paddle programs for the past few years, and sometimes we pros make the mistake on canceling practices because it's raining, or because it's too cold or whatever. I mean, I think that it's not great to play under the rain, and sometimes could be dangerous. But
you have to learn how to do it.
But if it's a little light rain, I would encourage pros and players to keep those practices in the schedule, because you will play some league matches under the rain or tournament matches.
It's inevitable.
Under the rain, and it's good to to know what's gonna happen and develop a strategy around that. If you don't know what you're doing and you have to play a match in the rain, you're gonna be improvising, and a team that has the most experience will win.
So get out there, practice in the rain, and enjoy it.
If you can.